Mr. President, I want to take a few moments this afternoon to correct the record on something very important. In his opening remarks this morning, the distinguished Senate Majority Leader made a number of claims and accusations relating to the tax extenders legislation. As you'll recall, last week the Senate voted not to invoke cloture on a substitute amendment to the tax extenders bill. Now, since that time, the Senate Majority Leader has been accusing Republicans of voting against tax relief. He said we're obstructionists and that we, quote, work so hard to do nothing, unquote. This is, as we know, par for the course. When the Majority Leader isn't calling out American citizens by name and attacking them for getting involved in the political process, he's usually accusing Senate Republicans of one thing or another and doing it so unjustifiably. Today, he attacked me personally for my vote against cloture on the tax extender substitute, saying, quote, the primary Republican who negotiated this, the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, voted against his own bill, unquote. Now, it is true that I negotiated. It is true that I helped to get it through the Senate. It is true that I got our side to agree to a voice vote. Needless to say, Mr. President, I can't let this go unanswered. I'm here now to set the record straight. First and foremost, I want to make clear that I support the tax extenders legislation, and everybody in this body knows it. And if they don't, then they better go take an IQ test. I want to see that bill passed, and I believe we should pass it sooner rather than later. Now, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I suspect that the majority of Senate Republicans feel the same way. But there are serious and legitimate process issues at stake here. At the time of last week's cloture vote, the substitute amendment had been available to the full Senate for little more than a day. And although there were 167 amendments filed, including about 70 Democratic Party amendments, the distinguished Majority Leader blocked the consideration of any and all amendments. Now, this unfortunately has become the norm here in the Senate, where we have voted for a grand total of 9 Republican amendments in the past 10 months. 9. By contrast, in the House of Representatives, where the Republicans are in complete control, where the Rules Committee is 9-4 in favor of Republicans, the committee that decides what comes to the floor, the Democrats, who are in the minority, have had votes on 242 of their amendments in that same time frame. Sheila Jackson Lee, for instance, a single Democratic House member, has received votes on 22 separate amendments in the same time frame that all Republican senators have combined, received votes on only 9. So yes, I, along with almost all of my Republican colleagues, voted against cloture. In fact, all but one voted against cloture on the tax extender substitute. But I made it clear before and after the vote that my vote against cloture was a vote to allow senators, both Republicans and Democrats, especially those that don't serve on the Senate Finance Committee, an opportunity to amend the tax extenders legislation, something you would think every senator in this body would want to justify and would want to support. Like I said, at the time of the cloture vote, there were a total of 167 amendments filed. Yet the Senate majority attempted to close off debate on the bill without considering or voting on a single amendment on a bill costing $85 billion so far. Now, that's no way to operate the Senate, Madam President, particularly on a bill as broad and as consequential as the tax extenders bill. There are a lot of interests at stake with the expired or expiring tax provisions, a number of voices that deserve to be heard. Why then would we want to rush through the debate without considering a single solitary amendment? It just doesn't make sense. My vote against cloture was never intended to kill this legislation, as the Majority Leader claimed this morning. As I made clear last week, my vote was for a fair, open, and cooperative process, a bipartisan process, if you will, something we haven't had much of around here lately. I would have thought the Majority Leader would have been listening last week when Republicans, including myself, made it very clear why we were voting against cloture. But either he wasn't listening or he forgot everything we said, because this morning he came to the floor to attack us once again, claiming that somehow our votes against cloture on the tax extenders legislation were related to President Obama. So let me make it clear for our distinguished majority leader and anyone else who may be misunderstanding what's going on with the tax extenders bill. This has nothing to do with President Obama. There's only one person who is stopping the tax extenders bill from moving forward. It is not me. It's not the minority leader. It's not anyone on the Republican side or caucus. The distinguished majority leader could solve this impasse today if he would simply allow the Senate to operate in the way it always has. And he knows, and he knew then when he made these comments, because we chatted the day before. He knew that my job is to try and winnow down the total number of amendments on this bill, approaching almost 100 for each side, and get it to where we basically could pass this bill. Now, he can come to the floor as often as he wants to attack Republican senators or anyone else, but that doesn't change the fact that he is the one in control here. He is the one who will decide if the Senate will live up to its legacy of being the greatest deliberative body in the world, or if it will continue to be what it has become, a graveyard of ideas. Once again, I stand willing and able to work with the Democrats to get this bill across the finish line. I do want this legislation to pass. It's important legislation. But I do think we ought to have the Senate operate like it always has in the past, where each side has at least a reasonable opportunity to bring up amendments that they consider to be important. It's important that the Senate operate in that way, and not in the way it's currently being operated. But like I said, Mr. President, it's not up to me.